So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Woo Hee.
Thank you, Kevin. Hi, everyone. I'm Woo Hee, Program Officer in the Division of Research on Learning at the National Science Foundation. Welcome to the session, Keeping Trust, Communicating Findings and the Future Work to Communities. This session explores ideas about how projects can center communities as partners to communicate findings, plan next steps for the projects, and develop goals, values for project institutions and the field. As you know, trust is crucial to the success of our research work with communities, particularly with underserved and underrepresented communities. Some communities may have doubts with research projects and their benefits. Sometimes underserved or underrepresented communities feel they have been used by researchers or academic institutions for funding purposes. For example, Native Americans are often suspicious of unfamiliar individuals who come to their community and want to conduct research about them. So a key question is, what can be done to address the trust issue? We need to be aware individuals bring different strengths and perspectives to the project. A researcher may worry about the research-related issues. For example, is the methodology rigorous? Is the data quality good or bad? Do we analyze and interpret the data properly? Do we draw the conclusions properly? Communities may worry about upholding community norms and ensuring equitable voice during the whole process for research. They often want to know whether the findings or solutions could provide immediate benefits to them or not. In other words, all partners need to be aware of the asset, language, and the cultural differences and take steps to manage the differences in order to ensure they can trust the research results and outcomes. They want to know whether those results or outcomes will benefit everybody involved in the project or not. Furthermore, trust is an earned currency based on mutual respect and the mutual assumption of the other, acting in the best interest of all participants involved in the project. Communication plays an important role in building a trusted relationship. Communication as trust building is more than choosing the right words. It is a form of respectful engagement that honors everyone we engage with. What partners communicate and how partners communicate affect the way in which a community is fostered, nurtured, and sustained. I'm pleased to have 8 presenters in this session. They represent 4 different projects that work with different communities, including underserved communities in different ways. I will let each presenter introduce themselves and their projects. I want to thank them in advance for sharing their experience, thought, and perspectives with us. Next, I will turn it over to our first project team, Water Value Projects. So I pass it over to Bhaskar from the University of Wisconsin, Minnesota, sorry.
So thank you, everybody. I see some familiar faces. First of all, thank you to NSF for providing the funding and resources to carry out this collaborative work. So if the tribal elder, Holly Pellerin, is here, please join me at any time. So before I start, 2 things I would like to request from everybody. One is that I will only share a couple of slides that are part of the NSF proposal. And then the rest of the slides I won't be able to share because the tribal council still has to approve it, and it's in the process of approval. It's just a little bit behind. once it's approved, I will share with the rest of the group if you would like. So I just want to let everybody know on that. So basically, these were the 6 objectives of the collaboration that we have. But for today, we would like to talk about developing collaborative partnerships, especially with Native communities, which is always the most challenging and I would say the most rewarding too at the same time. And so the big aspect of it is that it is a partnership between a tribal community, the Bell Museum at the University of Minnesota, and the University of Minnesota researchers from the St. Anthony Falls Laboratory, STEM education program, and art and design. So with the Native community. So one of the things for us, the key aspect for our partnership with Native community, which very likely is not new to anyone, but I just want to say it right away, is that all Native communities in the United States are sovereign nations. So we have to realize that as outside researchers, they are the sovereign nation. Therefore, the collaboration for us was about trust, which is the title of this whole presentation today, is that how do we build a mutual trust? And with that comes the respect. So we have to value and respect both we as an outsider representing different communities, even though we represent University of Minnesota, but I represent a different community versus a co-PI versus at the same time, we are also representing larger other communities within which we interact. The other part of it is the appreciation of the culture. That's really important because we come from various lenses. Therefore, our worldviews are different. Doesn't mean they are wrong or right, they just are different. But at the end of the day, we understand each other. That's an important part. And that was a very important aspect of this particular research, is to build this relationship. The other part of it is relationship. We understand relationship as an efficient process to build trust. Relationships are never efficient. If we put timelines, relationships will just fall apart. It's almost like dating somebody. You do not date somebody and decide to be lifelong partners in one date, saying, I have 3 hours to decide on you. It's not going to happen. Therefore, we have to be very aware and patient that especially Native communities and underrepresented communities are coming from spaces of distrust of the outside, especially when people from outside who come with a lot of power and resources, where the communities feel that they don't have agency to ask for their space and what they need. That's an important aspect for us. Therefore, it takes a longer time. And I'll talk about that in a second as an advice to NSF, especially the program officers and everybody. And then they are also equal partners. So in collaboration, we always understood that if the community did not want what we thought would be a great idea, we would say, let's talk about it. And a lot of times we may have to abandon them, or we adjust quite a lot to ensure that it fits what the community wants. And then the other part is flexibility on both sides, especially from the researcher sides, because we come from institutions that have historical baggage that have been really painful for many communities, especially Native communities. So for example, in many institutions, just like University of Minnesota, we acknowledge that the university resides in Dakota land, annexed by force. So we have to be really careful about that. The other part of it is that not only the knowledge, but also data we collect in Native communities are native sovereign knowledge. Therefore, we always want to seek their approval, what we can share and what we cannot share. And so at the end, what I want to say in our partnership is that it's about respect and relationship. And one suggestion to NSF is that please add extra time for those proposals who want to work with Native communities. Otherwise, they will run into every single time asking for no cost extension, multiple times. And very likely we will be one of them seeking that, because it's an important part of it, of learning. Thank you, since I see the hand raised.
So next I turn it over to Makita and Bobby. Yeah, so you are the next team for presentation.
Okay, this is Bobby in Atlanta, Georgia. The spoken word, America, America. God has shared his grace on thee. Let me say that another way. To the National Science Foundation, Cornell Lab of Ornithology in Ithaca, New York, to Karen Parcell, our principal investigator of the NORS project, to my cohorts who are first-time community-based co-PIs that scattered across this country, to our junior CSCs, and to the next G, the next generation of scientists, researchers, and community leaders. The fight for equity, diversity, and inclusion has not been easy and will continue not to be easy. But I invite you as scientists and educators to join us in this fight. And the songwriter said, no matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now. We are first-time co-PIs that's coming out of the community. All of us are coming out of marginalized and underserved communities. I have been a part of the research. We have looked at barriers. We have looked at opportunities. We've seen the fear. We understand the risk of collaborating with community-based organizations. We understand the dog whistles, but we also understand that race is at the center of what keeps America from moving forward. If we're ever going to make America great, we must find a way to deal with racism. We must build trust and transparency among the haves and the have-nots. We must build trust and transparency among those that have power and privilege. If we want to move the National Science Foundation to the next level, we must bring community-based organizations to the table, and not only bring us to the table, but give us a voice at the table. Let us co-create the next projects together from start to finish. We don't want you to write the grant and then come to us. And most of all, let's not forget about the budget. The budget is important because most of the time, our communities have been left out of getting their fair share. Research on the farm. Research with the NORS project. Research with the 1890 land grant schools. Research with marginalized and underserved communities. We have come together on the NORS project. Let me say, community-based organization, we know our worth. We want to be paid for what we are worth. No matter, we don't want a report that will end up on the shelf that have been provided for those with the power. Dissemination is at the core of the NORS project work. We understand clearly that you as people with power and privilege, we understand clearly that we need to be committed and we need to collaborate. Co-creation is tough. Dissemination isn't easy. When it comes down to racial justice and equality, let me close by saying Yes, we can. Yes, we can make a positive difference for those people of color in the sciences. If we can, yes, we as community-based organization and those of you with power and privilege can make life better for all people in America. I turn it over to you, Makeda.
Thank you, Bobby. I'm Makeda Cheatham, Executive Director of the World Beat Cultural Center in Balboa Park, and that's Kumeyaay Native Territory, San Diego, California. And I'm also a co-PI for the Noise Project. In this research project, the independent community-based organizations, or ICBOs, have been involved from the beginning to the end, including the research process. We came up with a study, created the questions, the research, the protocol, the data collection, analysis, did the interpretation and dissemination. When communities lead research projects, science institutions benefit because they are able to build trust with the communities because the research is in the community's interest and addressing the community's needs. If science institutions want research results and programming to be disseminated to the communities, then they need to ensure the community buy into the work and have equal say from the start. Communities bring a different set of perspectives and expertise. And for the communities, it is important that it is equitable exchange of expertise. Process is important to community-based organizations because it helps build a set of values and guidelines. Our values and guidelines can be found in our working agreements, non-negotiable and decision-making tool. This helps build trust, transparency, accountability. We have found that it is important that everyone in this process is involved in research, in the research process, because it helps understand and nurture cultural sensitivities with communities involved. I'd like to thank our co-PIs, our ICBOs, and the National Science Foundation. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great insight. The next, I turn it over to Andres, who will talk about his project, Playful Learning Experience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Will. Okay, let me share screen. So, hi, my name is Andres Bustamante. I'm an assistant professor at UC Irvine in the School of Education. And I'm the PI of NSF AZLE project, where we are co-designing playful learning environments in public spaces like parks, bus stops, grocery stores, laundromats, anywhere where children and families spend time. And we're designing them with the community that's going to use them in the end so that they're reflective of the community, cultural capital, funds of knowledge, history, culture. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna give you a quick introduction to our community partner, and then talk a little bit about what we've accomplished and how we keep those lines of communication open and continue to build trust and collaborative, our deep collaborative relationship with our community partner. So our community partner is called SAILI, the Santa Ana Early Learning Initiative. And I'm going to turn it over to Paola Padilla, who's the director of SAILI, to just tell you a little bit about SAILI and who they are and the amazing stuff that they do.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paola Padilla. As Andres mentioned, I am the director of the Santa Ana Early Learning Initiative, or SAILI for short. So who are we, right? We are a community-led partnership made up of parents, caregivers, nonprofit organizations, elementary schools, city agencies, colleges and universities, funders, and other leaders dedicated to improving literacy, numeracy, and social emotional development for all children 0 to 9 years old in Santa Ana. So we've been working with families since 2018 to engage them in this process of co-design and to integrate them into really helping promote early learning. Very often we see that families are left out of the conversation. And as previously mentioned, grants are written and then they're asked, parents or families are asked for input. We started the other way around. So we've been working on multiple projects where parents have been leads, parent-led projects, parent designed, and again, all for the benefit of our early learning community. We have 2 core strategies, so parent and community engagement and empowerment, and service and systems alignment. I'm only going to talk about the first one just very briefly because it's really the largest core of our stakeholder group, and it is parents, right? We work across about 8 different neighborhoods in Santa Ana, and if you are not familiar with Santa Ana, California, we are the 4th densest city in the country. So we have a population of about 320,000 right now, 20 schools that we're working with, about 250 parents. And we have for the last few years focused on training neighborhood leadership teams, which is again, residents, parents in the community, with 4 core functions. And 1 is to inform, educate, and support families with children 0 to 9. 2, link young families to formal and informal supports. 3, provide feedback to improve services for young families. And 4, advocate to improve systems and policies for young families. So we've been, the 4th one, we've been really advocating for a lot of housing and open spaces in Santa Ana. And as of yesterday, I am proud to say that with the support of SAILI and a lot of other groups, rent control was passed in Santa Ana, which is historical. So again, I just wanted to briefly mention some of the things that we've done, but we have been, like I said, at the very beginning, just making sure that parent voice, community resident leaders are at the center of everything that we do. They're part of our steering committee. And part of the reason why we decided to partner with UCI as our PI is because how they were allowing us to be part of this conversation. And I guess the word allow is a little, I don't want to say that, it's just, I guess, the integration of us into this great collaboration and this amazing co-design process that we have been working on for the past year. And so Andres, you can go ahead and.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. Beautiful summary. Yeah, just to speak really, really briefly to the theme of the session, which is about communications and sharing results. One thing that our group did that I think has been immensely powerful and has really set the tone for our collaboration, our communication, is that in the very beginning of the project, Paula invited me to serve not only as an outside partner on this one project, but on the steering committee for the whole SAILI organization. And so I'm not just an outside researcher who's collaborating with SAILI on this project. Like, I'm now a member of SAILI leadership, and I give feedback and attend all their monthly calls and the General Assembly meetings to give updates. And so I now have like the blessing to be able to collaborate on many projects that they're doing, even beyond the one that I'm PI of and spearheading. And so this allows me to give updates and continuous feedback to SAILI parents and the SAILI organization through these other calls, and also allows me to understand the broader scope of what SAILI is doing, which, like Paola mentioned, they're doing some amazing grassroots organizing in Santa Ana. And so by having that fuller perspective of what they're doing, we're able to kind of align efforts and really capitalize on other initiatives that are happening in the organization. And so for me, that's been like transformative in my views on kind of community partnerships and reframing. And that's something that came from Paula and Rigo, the other leaders, the other director of SAILI. And so, yeah, with this last minute or so, I'd just love to show you a couple of the initial ideas that came out of our design sessions from last year. We did 7 2-hour design sessions over Zoom because of the pandemic, but we had about 40 parents from Santa Ana. We sent arts and crafts, and we had them literally dream up their public spaces, that how they would want to see them, that would reflect their culture and their history. And so we have grocery store signage that involves like passing down local knowledge about how to pick the best produce and using your senses for observation. We had lots of families tell stories about immigrating from Mexico and not knowing the imperial system of measurement, being used to the metric system, and having this funny stories about ordering way too much ham or not nearly enough. So we have like a conversion chart, which could be a really helpful artifact. Families talked about how they used the abacus to learn math growing up. And so we figured, why can't we do a giant abacus at the bus stop? Using cultural games like Loteria, which are really popular in integrating, early math and science learning opportunities into these kind of community games, memory games. Murals is a big thing, public art, and they want communities to be beautiful. And how can we make them interactive? So like showing the steps to making a mural and then having chalkboard paint so kids can kind of copy the steps. I Spy, this is just a stock image. This is not, we're still working on the designs. Let's see, I'm cognizant of time, but yeah, nature walks and things that involve observing the local nature and again, integrating cultural games and having families be able to share those. So I'll stop there. It's just in the interest of time, but would love to, chat with people more. I'm really looking forward to the poster session and with connecting with folks.
Thank you. Great project. Yeah, that's really brilliant. So next I will turn it over to our next speaker, Monica.
Hello, Adobe. My name is Monica Ramirez, and I'll be presenting with Maria Ochoa, and I'll share my screen. All right, can you see the screen? All right. So this is, we'll be talking about Project Harvest, which is a partnership with the Sonoran Environmental Research Institute and 4 different communities across the state of Arizona. To begin, I wanted to just do a land acknowledgement. So we respectfully acknowledge that the University of Arizona is on the lands and territories of Indigenous people. Today, Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the Tono, O'odham, and Yaqui. We're committed to diversity and inclusion, and the university strives to build sustainable relations with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. With that said, Project Harvest is a co-created citizen science program where the community members brought the research question to light about what is the quality of harvested rainwater, and can I use that water to irrigate my garden and other plants. This is a large team of promotoras or community health workers, which you see along the top. And I will now, just acknowledging the large team here, will pass it over to Lisa.
Okay, my role as a promotora was a health educator. And I got interested in the promotora role when Monica came and presented it to the school and the community. And she got everybody kind of excited about learning about what the rainwater and how we can use it. We trained in groups, and as she had a big science get together with students and teachers and the community. And we actually had the community sign up if they were interested. So that was kind of easy because we got the members from the community that had an interest about our rainwater. We live in a real small mining community. And so building trust was not hard for me because I have lived here all my life in the community. And so I knew most of the people that were going to be involved. I did home-to-home visits. I administered surveys, and some of them did not want to struggle with the computer or the iPad, so we did it on paper and we sat there together, asked them questions. I also helped them to collect samples if they collected their water and then they called and said, Maria, I need some help. I forgot how to do the collection or how to do the testing. I would go over and spend time with them, always making sure that they felt that their work was important, what they were doing to help us and what they were doing to help the community, which was trying to figure out if our water was going to be safe to drink. I went to several professional development trainings. We were very flexible with the people. Monica had like 3 or 4 dates that they could collect their samples, so they weren't set on a set schedule. So if they missed the first sampling, they could get the second sampling. So that made it much easier for them. I went right into their homes. If they were making their tamales, I sat down with them until they were done. And then we talked about Project Harvest and went on with our experiment or project, whatever we were doing. Communicating the findings. We had several data sharing events, and she's showing you a graph here. The U of A people that were helping us were very helpful because they helped us to, if we didn't understand how to read graphs, they went as far as to show us how to read a graph. And they showed us exactly what we were looking at. So our participants were never at a loss. It was always a teaching, learning, and kind of an environment. They very private because we always considered them only by kit number. Even though we were gathered together in a sharing event, each participant had their own data, and they were told that their data was distinguished with a solid, with a circle around their dot, and everybody else was, as you can see on the graph here, if it was your own personal data, then it was outlined with a darker circle, and everybody else's data was in a light colored circle. So when you were looking at the data, you knew which one was yours, but you could not tell whose data was whose. It was very private, and even though we were as a group sharing, even the people that missed the data sharing because of other personal appointments or whatever they had to do, they still each got their data books and still had an opportunity to sit down with me as a promotora or any other person in the group to go over their data. So, they had a beginning where they collected the data, they had the process of collecting the data, and then they had the end where they got their data was explained to them. So they were part of the whole experiment. And then, so that's how we got the communicating findings. And about the communicating future work, we had one community member that moved into our community who was not from here. And so he wanted to plant a garden, and he heard that we were sampling the water. So he actually got in contact with Monica and said that he wanted his water tested. So even while we were still maybe in the second year of the project, we accepted him as a participant because he was willing to, for one, and that's what he wanted to do. That's what we want. We want our community to have the question and then be able to have findings and have the resources that they need to understand about their water and the water usage. I just had a participant yesterday, in fact, this past weekend, asking me still for a water gauge, okay? Because he said, I lost my water gauge and I still want to continue doing that part of collecting the water gauge. We also respected everybody's strengths and weaknesses. There were some people that, there was one participant that was already into monitoring water. He worked for a water project, but he was very willing to help, and which was great. We used his resources, and then we had some that were literally had to be explained everything, and which it wasn't very hard. The experiments and the testing that the project people created were not hard for our community members to pick up and understand. So they were able to, by the end of the project, practically do the testing of the samples themselves, which they really like to do, so.
So I think we're out of time here. So is that correct? Okay, so if there's any further questions about Project Harvest, please feel free to look at the website. What I'm showing here is just the map of the participating communities, and you can see the years on top of the raindrops highlighting the longevity of the trust building and partnerships in each of these spaces to make this project work. Thank you. Thanks, Lisa.
Great. Thanks to all the presenters for sharing your insight, advice, experience with us. Yeah, your presentations are very informative. Yeah, so I learned a lot. Yeah, so I appreciate the feedback you provided to us as well as the National Science Foundation. So I want to share a few things I learned from your presentation. So first, I can see strong community partnership across these projects. So those PIs and the community partners made a lot of efforts to co-create and engage their communities. Yeah, so that's how they can build the trusted relationship. I also learned it is critical to value the community wisdom and expertise, which could inform and improve the project design. I also learned researchers need to make intentional efforts to build the trust with communities in a timely, transparent, respectful, and honest way in order to maintain the trust with community partners. As Bhaskar from the Water Value Project team advised, it really takes time to build a trusted relationship with the communities. We need to be patient in the process of developing and fostering the trust with the communities. So frustration and complaint won't help much in terms of building equitable partnership and maintain the trust between researchers and the community partners. I also want to mention one more thing I learned. Yeah. So yeah, I know some of the projects may end in one year. So what will happen when the AZO project and the funding ends? So how can the trust that has been built between communities, educators, researchers, and others could continue after the funding ends? So that's an important matter. So when the funding maybe is over, it doesn't necessarily mean your relationship with the community should end. Since you already took a lot of time to build the relationship and the trust with the community, I will encourage you to continue to build, increase, and maintain the trust relationship with your communities and the collaborators, regardless of the funding or not. Yeah, those are just a few thoughts I have. Thanks for listening. So next.